You like my shirt is a bear shirt.
I see that. And what do you got here? You want to show them?
A cookie.
Okay.
It's made of chocolate.
Who made that cookie?
Me and Mama.
Yeah. And what else is in it besides chocolate? You remember the ingredients?
No, I just want to tell you, vanilla tastes really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you make a chocolate chip cookies though? Like,
do you guys know how to? Because I know you guys know how to.
should we let them think about it? Maybe they could look it up, and then we'll tell them later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. We'll tell you how to make the cookies after the lesson.
After I eat it, we'll show you one of the round ones. They got from flat to round.
All right. All right. As always, hope you're safe. Hope you're healthy. Hope your family is safe and healthy. Keep up the hard work this unit. Most of you have. Have you completed tasks 1 through 4? If you have not, you need to get caught up. We're about halfway through. We're going to have our next quiz next week. We'll start getting ready for that quiz next week. So you need to make sure you're caught up with tasks 1 through 4. Here are the tasks you should have done so far. Task 1 was a paragraph about the United Nations. Task 2, coming up with a nickname for the Iron Curtain or the Cold War with explanation. Task 3 was some multiple choice questions about the policy of containment. Task 4 was a paragraph about the Berlin airlift and whether it was worth it or not. You also had a guided reading due. Guided reading number 1, Superpowers Face Off. There'll be another guided reading for this unit soon, so make sure you're keeping up. And today's task is going to be a check for understanding. So with that in mind, we're going to do some review, take us back through where we've been in this unit before we move forward. So here's our review. We'll do a little fill in the blank. Review. Fill in the blanks with the words that best complete the reading below. So you're thinking, there's no word bank here. You're just thinking off the top of your head. Can you figure these out? The United States and the Soviet Union were allies during. When were they allies? When did they work together? During World War II. Still, the two superpowers had sharp political and economic differences. So even though they worked together, they were very, very different. After the war, the Soviet Union wanted to spread its economic system, which is communism, and the United States wanted to do the opposite of that. They wanted to encourage capitalism and or democracy, either of those two, the economic system of capitalism or the political system of democracy. Notice, communism is in red, capitalism is in blue. Things that involve both of them together, such as World War II, are in purple, mixing the two together. So, the growing struggle between Americans and the Soviets came to be called, so this is a new war. Of course, it's not World War III. It was not a hot war. It was a Cold War. So, this marks the beginning of the Cold War, and this is the focus of this unit. Winston Churchill came up with a phrase to describe the division between communism on one side of Europe and capitalism on the other side of Europe. The phrase was called the Iron Curtain. It's like a red curtain that Stalin had put up to buffer or to protect the Soviet Union. And the Iron Curtain divided Europe into communist Eastern Europe on one side, supported by the Soviet Union, and mostly democratic/capitalist Western Europe. When Stalin refused to allow free elections in Eastern Europe, U.S. presidents, you're thinking, who was president then? He had a policy. His policy was to help out countries that were resisting communism. His name was President Truman, and his policy that he began, the Truman policy, was this policy of containment, stopping communism from spreading more, keeping communism in a box, not eliminating it from the places that it already was, like the Soviet Union, but just containing it from spreading anymore. As part of this policy, the United States adopted the blank to help European countries rebuild from World War II. So this is specific to Europe. They're providing specific aid in what's called the Marshall Plan to help European countries rebuild. Continuing on. The Soviets and Americans clashed over Germany. Remember, Germany had been divided into 4 containment zones. The Western Allies allowed their zones to unite into what became West Germany, and the Soviets controlled East Germany, but the Western Allies still had a little bit of territory in East Germany in a city called West Berlin. So the Soviets cut off all highway and train traffic into West Berlin, which was deep within the Soviet zone. So how did the United States respond? What did they do? What's the event that occurred? The U.S. and British responded with the Berlin Airlift. They flew in supplies into the city of West Berlin for 11 months. Finally, after that, the Soviets gave up. They lifted the blockade. Here comes the blockade. It's coming in. It's there. And then it's gone because they lifted it. All right. So here we are today. Why did the United States and the Soviet Union create rival alliances during the Cold War? So we already know that they're rivals. Why would they create rival alliances? I think you can make a prediction about that already. If you're thinking about this idea of they're trying to be as strong as possible. If they have allies to help them, that's going to increase their strength. Let's take a look at it here on our diagram we've been working from. So during World War II, they were friends, the Soviet Union and the United States. Then after World War II, they became rivals in what became known as the Cold War. The Soviet Union expanded its power by creating communist governments in Eastern Europe. This helped make the Soviet Union stronger. The United States wanted to contain the Soviet Union and stop the spread of communism so that the United States would be stronger. In addition, the United States said, well, why don't we create a new official alliance? We're going to call this alliance NATO, which means North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And they got 11 countries to join them in NATO, including Canada, which is here in North America with us, and countries in Western Europe. Western Europe, North America, these countries were united as NATO, so they're all in it together. If anyone is attacked, they're all going to work together to fight back or to defend against any attacks together collectively. So that made the United States a little stronger. Not to be outdone, the Soviet Union said, well, we're going to make our own official rival alliance called the Warsaw Pact, and they got 7 countries. They were all countries in Eastern Europe to join their alliance, making the Soviet Union a little bit stronger. So you can see that these two sides are escalating up the tension between one another and getting more countries involved. So it becomes Warsaw Pact versus NATO in this Cold War. So let's talk about this. Why these alliances? Consider alliances such as the alliance between Serbia and Russia prior to World War I, or the Triple Entente, which was Great Britain, France, and Russia, also prior to World War I. Those are good examples to look back at for the benefits as well as some of the problems of these official military alliances. So what are the benefits of creating a formal official alliance? Why would a strong country like the U.S. want to get more countries on their side? Why would a weak country want to join in an alliance with a stronger country? So think about Serbia, right? Serbia was a smaller country, but Russia had its back when Austria-Hungary declared war on it. So it made Serbia a little bit stronger, right? So countries can become stronger together. They're less likely to be attacked if there's this idea of collective defense. Someone's not going to attack, say, France, for example, if they know Great Britain and the U.S. are going to jump in to help. right? Those countries can depend on each other for help. They can share military resources. They can share intelligence, such as what's going on immediately in that area. For example, the United States has a strong alliance with the country of Israel currently, and that allows the United States to have some intelligence, meaning knowledge of what's going on in that region that they might not have otherwise, okay? These alliances are especially helpful for weaker countries, and it's also helpful for strong countries in knowing that, hey, if these countries are my allies, at least I know they're not going to be the ones to attack us. What are the risks of creating a formal or official military alliance? Well, if you look at the Triple Entente, you can see you might get pulled into an unnecessary conflict, and you may end up with more enemies. So, for example, Great Britain and France didn't have a problem with Austria-Hungary or even with Germany. But because those countries were against Russia, they had to jump in. And Russia wasn't necessarily even against those countries to begin with. Russia was stepping in to help Serbia in the war. So you can get pulled into an unnecessary conflict based on decisions of your allies that may or may not have been smart decisions. Okay. Now, in the context of the Cold War, I don't know what happened to our slide there. There it is. In the context of the Cold War, in response to a Soviet-sponsored communist takeover in Czechoslovakia. So that happens. Communists take over in Czechoslovakia, which was previously not a communist country. So Stalin spreading communism. Then the Soviets blockade West Berlin. U.S. leaders agreed to discuss creating a joint security agreement, meaning an official alliance with their European allies. Not one where it's like, hey, we say we're friends, but an official one where we're signing up and saying, like, if any of us are attacked, we're going to fight back together. So, is this a smart move? On one hand, they're stronger together against the Soviet Union. But consider this. Both world wars had started in Europe and spread all throughout the world, right? So, officially joining in an alliance with Europe, with any country in Europe, is risky because there is a lot of hostility there. The countries there are smaller than over here in North America. They're more likely to have tensions with one another or disagreements with one another that could lead to war. So there's a risk of getting pulled into some conflict that might start World War III. All right. So here's the vocab. You already know it because it's come up a bunch of times already. Collective security is one of the vocab terms. Cooperation of several countries in an alliance to strengthen the security of each country. It's almost like a union, right? A workers' union makes all the workers together stronger than just one worker going on strike or trying to get a raise or better benefits. So it's same here. All these countries working together are stronger if they're working together. The two alliances, NATO, as I already said, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was formed in 1949, so just a few years after World War II. 10 Western European nations, and the US and Canada. So it was 12 countries in total to begin with. These countries were non-communist. And this alliance still exists today with 30 countries. This alliance is now 71 years old. It's kind of become an old man in the world. It's existed for a long time, has gained a lot of experience, and some might argue it's been effective based on the fact that we haven't entered into World War III yet, and hopefully never. So this alliance, of course, was in rivalry with the Warsaw Pact, which was created afterwards. Military alliance formed in 1955 by the Soviet Union. 7 Eastern European countries. So again, it's that division between East and West, divided by the Iron Curtain. On the other side of the Iron Curtain, the eastern side, all of those countries were communist. This alliance no longer exists. The Soviet Union no longer exists. Some of the countries in this alliance still exist. However, some of them actually now members of NATO. Let's look at it on the map just to very, very clearly divide it up between this East and West and this Iron Curtain. So NATO is Western Europe. Also, of course, it includes USA and Canada, which are not in Western Europe. are in North America. And some of the key players are going to include Great Britain, France, and then Germany, as we know, was split. So West Germany was part of NATO, while West Germany and East Germany were divided up. The Warsaw Pact in the eastern part of Europe, of course, includes the Soviet Union, some other key players, Poland, and East Germany, another key player in that. So you can see at this time, Germany was not only divided into two separate countries, it joined two rival alliances. And in some ways, it was expected that there was a lot of tension that if World War III started, it could start due to some event there where these two opposing sides of this previously united country had a lot of tension with each other. Here's another look at it on the map to give you this idea of just how this alliance made countries stronger. So this map shows troop strengths in Europe. So you can see the Soviet Union had 1.25 million soldiers. That's a lot, right? France had 720,000 soldiers. That's a lot also, right? But if you add up the totals in these countries and territories, they become stronger together. So Western Europe, NATO, had 3 million soldiers ready to go in their territories, and the Warsaw Pact had 3.1 million soldiers ready to go. It's pretty close to even. It's only a difference of 100,000, which when you're talking about millions is not that much at that point. So you can see how both sides became stronger by unifying together, meaning the Warsaw Pact unified with its allies. It had 3 million troops. NATO unified with its allies. It had 3 million troops as well to go against each other in the event that it ever came to it. As mentioned, NATO still exists today. You can see this screenshot from their website, screenshot taken just last week. Coronavirus response is one of their focuses right now in terms of supporting everyone who's in the alliance. Here's another view of the map. All right, so countries in North America, Canada and US are part of the alliance, and countries in Europe, including countries that were previously part of the Warsaw Pact now, such as Poland, are part of the NATO alliance. And this idea of NATO, why is it called NATO? NATO, NA, stands for North Atlantic, because if you look at the map, there's the Atlantic Ocean. On both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, there are members of this alliance, and they're on the northern side of the Atlantic Ocean. Someone's going to point out, hey, what about that little spot down there in South America? That's territory that's controlled by France, so that's why it's also included in the alliance. The NATO alliance continues to grow. Most recently, March 30th, which is just over a month ago, North Macedonia became the newest member of the NATO alliance. And then let's go back to this idea of collective security. Oftentimes it's seen as being beneficial to the smaller or weaker nations to be part of NATO because the Soviet Union, or now a country like Russia, is less likely to mess with them. That's true. However, I do want to point out it's also beneficial for the larger countries. For example, the only time that NATO had to invoke what's called its collective defense article, the only time that a country had to say, look, an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, was the September 11th attack. So the United States and NATO invoked the collective defense article, meaning, hey, we are all in this together. We all have to fight against terrorism together in order to make ourselves safer. So I think that's interesting to point out how it also benefits the U.S. to be involved in these type of alliances. All right, so we have no guided reading, no reading today. Crazy. But we do have a task. Your task is going to be a check for understanding task. It's going to be matching. You're going to type the letter of the term that matches the statement. Each term will only be used one time. There are going to be 10 statements total, meaning 10 terms to choose from. 6 of the statements are going to be based on Cold War aims 1 through 5, including a couple of statements that relate to this lesson. 4 of the statements come from Cold War guided reading number 1. So those of you who haven't done the guided reading, you're going to need to refer to that text, and hopefully this will motivate you as well to complete that guided reading so that you are able to do your best on this particular task. So it's a Google form. It's going to look like this. Right? All the terms are at the top of the form. So all you need to do is type your answers into the space below. Let's do this first one together. This involved dividing Germany into sections controlled by the Soviet Union and the Western powers. And I have a cake being cut up, kind of like that, how they cut up. We talked about cutting up Africa like a cake, cutting up China like a cake. Germany was also cut up like a cake after World War II. This comes from Cold War guided reading number 1. This is a bonus to you because we have not discussed this one. So I will give you the answer to this one so you can see how this is done. The correct answer is Yalta Agreement. So what I would type here in your answer is just the letter J because I'm looking back at the list at the top. J, Yalta Agreement is correct. Right? So for the next one then, this names the first satellite to be launched into space by any country. Well, I know it's not going to be J. I go back through the list, figure out which one it is. I'm not going to tell you which one it is right now. You're going to figure out the other 9. Okay? Then after you have filled in all of these with a letter response matching up the term with the statement, you'll click on Submit, turn it in. You will get your score right away, and you will get credit for the work that you have done. Don't forget, be safe, be healthy, keep up the hard work, finish any missing tasks from this unit so you are all caught up because we will start preparing for our Unit 11A quiz, Cold War quiz, next week. Thank you so much. Let's check back in with Joaquin. All right, so tell us, when you're making the cookies, what do you do with the ingredients?
You mix it. The dry ingredient is away from the wet ingredients.
Okay. And then what do you do with the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients?
You pour the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients.
Okay. And you just leave it there, or?
No, you stir it.
Okay, you stir it around.
And then you put the chocolate, and then you stir it again, and then you put it in the oven.
Okay.
And then you eat it.
And
but you need to let it cool.
Okay. Is yours cooled now?
Yeah, mine's cool.
Okay. Is it time to eat it? And I got mine here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone who's gonna make it. Did everyone
Bye.
watch the videos yet? Bye. Did you?